Hello, hello. Good morning? Yeah, I guess it is still morning. Good morning on this lovely Wednesday. This is a mid-employment podcast. So I'm actually, I was working half day today home, half day today in the office. I'm heading to the office because the county schools were shut down because we had monsoon level winds and rain last night and this morning. So maybe monsoon level's an exaggeration, but needless to say, 70 mile per hour gusts plus torrential downpour. That's the day you ask your boss if you can go in a little bit later. So as I'm driving, even now I'm feeling the wind hit the car. But today I wanted to talk about education. So when I mean education, there's a lot I could unpack there, but I want to talk about, generally speaking, the education system in the U.S. that most, if not every person follows, and then what you get out of it from each level of the system. And this is, I'm going to try to be as discreet and as factual as possible, but there will be my opinions thrown into, of course. And I'm doing this one for a multitude of reasons. One is the schools being closed down, put it on my mind. The second is I had a dream last night that I was back in high school of all places, and I can lucid dream a lot. And this one I even lucid dreamed, and I was in the dream. I knew I was in a dream. I was trying to wake myself up from the dream, and I knew I was dreaming. It was just very lame, but I couldn't wake up from the dream, which was really annoying. But I was stuck in high school, so call it a nightmare if you want, or not. But yeah, so on my way to work in the 20-ish minutes I got, maybe 25, depending on traffic, I wanted to talk about education. So this is education and how it works. To start off, everyone is born, and if you're in the U.S., you have the blessing of having school all the way up till high school paid for you, guaranteed. And then sometimes you can have college paid for you too, from sources outside yourself. But you have at least up until high school completely and utterly paid for you. So every American, I don't want to say every, but when I make generalizations like everyone and everybody, I'm talking about the general populace. Not actually 100% of people in this country. But everybody goes to elementary school. And even prior to that, you might have something known as pre-K or daycare, which is a glorified babysitting service where some person or some people watch a multitude of kids at the same time and take care of them. And it works out usually for the best. The parents get a chance to go to work and don't have to stress about watching their kids during the day. The kids get precursory levels of education. They might learn how to write their own names. They might learn how to hold a pencil, get that tactile knowledge, tacit knowledge. They might be able to understand basic social etiquette even at that young age because they're around people. They're not locked up at home, or they're not babysat by the same person all their lives. So, in that sense, pre-K or preschool is great for formative things. You're typically not going to pump a bunch of information into a kid in those years, but you will build a foundation for them. And that's helpful and can be crucial. It's funny, I got a school bus in front of me. I'm on the highway. And so the school bus is probably carrying elementary school kids. The one in my neighborhood that I left this morning was picking up kids, even though it's almost 11 p.m. a.m. It's almost 11 a.m. and this 2-hour delay they're still picking up kids because of how education works in the elementary school system. So elementary school, out of all three of the, I don't want to say primary, but the three main branches of education in the U.S., I believe elementary is picked up the latest with school buses. Now, I'll put in my bias real quick, is I went to private school all my life. It was the most affordable private school in the area. Like, we had the bare minimum of tuition costs, and I feel like I received a pretty decent education overall. Heck, I found out recently, one of my friends, he's older, my mentor, but he was on the school board for a while. And the school, apparently when I was going there as a kid, was actually basically going bankrupt. And they weren't making, it was a mix of they weren't making enough money and they were spending it in a more haphazard way. So I know funding is a big issue for schools in general, but this is a private school that did not rake in the dough. It was a private school that was made to give you an education, honor the Lord in that, and get you home. So it was a humble private school. Anyway, but talking about public education, as well as there's homeschool too, and homeschool's a whole nother bag, which can span all three, and you know that probably. But for elementary school, what you're learning in those first 6 years, because you have it goes up till 5th grade in this state and country, is elementary school typically, but you also have kindergarten, which is not a named grade yet, or I guess it is a named grade. It's the only named grade because they're all 1st, 2nd, 3rd, they're numbered. But kindergarten is a named grade. Kindergarten is when you're learning your basic math, your basic learning how to read and write, and that carries into 1st grade as well. I didn't learn how to read until I was in 1st grade, until I was 6 years old. I was illiterate for the first 6 years of my life, and since I have memories going back to 3.5, I remember how frustrating it was for those 2.5 years, not being able to read, and having to constantly ask my mom, what does that say? Because if I could hear it, I could understand meaning, but I couldn't read, and that was very frustrating because at those ages you're craving knowledge. Most kids do. It's even if they don't want it, they are asking so many questions. They're just learning about the world, and they don't realize it's a chore yet. Can be a chore. Well, some people like learning. Those go on to be PhDs and master's degrees. And then you get people like me who have want to learn enough for the ends to justify the means, and we get bachelor's degrees. Although aerospace education is nothing to sneeze at. But regardless, so elementary, formative years, you get your principal basis of reading and writing. And then you get up to 2nd grade onward, and you start just adding on concepts, albeit they're pretty slow in the addition of concepts, in my opinion. But you add on concepts one after another, and you layer and you build upon this basic foundation that all Americans should have across the board. Because for a school to teach, it needs to be accredited, typically speaking, unless it's homeschooled. And for that to happen, you have basic foundational things that have to be taught, and those have to be standardized, and they are. Of course, there's debate on that. I know Common Core is a big debate, is still a big debate, and what people are teaching nowadays in schools. There's always been debates over education. I'll just start with that and say it's nothing new. But currently speaking, I'm going to focus not on the politically charged stuff, but on the actual education. So you get through elementary school, you got your basis, you got your foundation, you get to middle school, and that's when you first start to specialize. So middle school is when you don't just have, ideally, one teacher teaching you everything, or maybe 3 teachers. So in elementary school, we had our homeroom teacher who was also our primary teacher for everything, all subjects, with the exceptions of art, music, and we also had chapels, because private school. But yeah, those were, and PE, of course. PE has its own teacher. But anything non-tactile, purely academic related, So, like reading, like math, unlike music and unlike physical education, those are all handled by one person in this country. And then you get to middle school, and then you actually specialize a bit. There's teachers who teach different things. So you might have a middle school English teacher, a middle school history teacher. And that's when kids get this first glimmer of they have individuality prior to this, but this is the puberty years. This is when education starts subdividing and becoming more specific. This is when a sense of serious individuality begins becoming developed. This is also the years when kids typically rebel from their parents and they don't really make dumb decisions, because ideally your parents don't let you make enough dumb decisions at this age, but you can. I mean, I know people who were, in middle school shacking up with people and drinking and had drugs. And you might be thinking, whoa, that's gross. Or like, oh, that's awful. Or you might be thinking, yeah, that's a Tuesday. Either way, I don't think middle schoolers should be engaging in sexual relations for obvious reasons. I don't think they should be drinking alcohol for developmental reasons or taking drugs for same reasons. But I knew people are like that. Regardless, though, these are the years, middle school is the years, where you have this developing sense of individuality and often a rebellious response to that. So, in terms of your education, though, this is when the kids start getting subdivided based on what they're good at. This is when the musicians really learn that they're good musicians or bad musicians or talented or not. Like, in elementary school, the only time a kid is playing music is if their parents introduced them to it, and then they typically will go with it as long as they want to until their parents stop forcing them. Although some kids will like it from a very young age. It's rare, though. But middle school, that's when kids start becoming more interested in music and tactile skills, or they become more interested in physical skills of like, oh, I want to be strong and buff and meme and dunk on the haters, or I want to learn how to, I don't want to say plumbing and woodworking, that's like old education had plumbing and woodworking in it, and shop classes. But in my middle school years, I joined the robotics club, and that was some of the most fun I had, was like being hands-on, doing design, developing robots from scratch. My brother was the programmer for it. Ironically, he does programming now for a living. But I do hands-on work. No, I don't. I do design level work. No, I don't. I do submittal, review, specification level work. I'm not designing the hardware, I'm just parting it out, which is fine, because you gotta know how it works. Anyway, these years are when kids get more tactile in their hands-on knowledge growth. This is when they want to learn things, technical skills, or at least start, ideally. And your social relationships develop more in middle school. This is when you start getting your BFFs that aren't just friends I see at school. This is when you start seeing them outside of school if you haven't already. This is when you go to the mall and hang out and walk in the Hot Topic and buy your black lip gloss, whatever fake piercings you want. This is when the guys have been gamers all their lives, but this is when a majority of the guys are like on Xbox Online with each other talking and, playing Call of Duty or whatever else they're doing. This is when they're being more social and they're interacting with other people, albeit digital sometimes. But yes, that's middle school. High school. Everyone has a different high school experience. High school can be the make or break years for your early, adult years. Some people get to delay that by going to college, some don't. But high school is where that sense of individuality has fully come out, but then starts to rescind a bit often, and you want to feel like you're part of a group. So you don't want to just be an individual. You want to be a functioning cog in some great machinery serving something beyond yourself. But oftentimes kids don't know what that looks like, high school kids especially, and they stay rebellious even though they have a yearning to be a part of something and to matter and to be something bigger. And this is also when education starts becoming it's always been a chore, but this is when kids really get burnt out from education. Because up until this point, you've had 10 years of just learning and not doing. And then you get to high school in 9th grade and you're like, well, great, I got 4 more years of learning and not doing, for the most part. And it's frustrating at times. But you specialize more, your education gets more developed. High school teachers have to deal with, middle school teachers deal with a lot of issues. High school teachers have to deal with a lot if they care. This is when your social relationships are happening. This is when kids have cars. This is when, I hate to say it, but this is when, people die. This is when accidents happen. I can think of growing up at least 3 people who attended my school or were closely related to people who died in high school, from car accidents and other tragedies, disease too. High school is when the real world starts to slap you in the face, but you're still in a bubble if you want to be in the bubble. High school, you're learning a lot, but you're also caring a little, typically speaking. But then sometimes you get highly motivated kids who want to do good in all that they are presented, and then they burn themselves out in high school. And when that happens, they kind of become adults who don't care because they accomplished their goal. And then what's next? It's a so what kind of response. So that happens too. Now me, just a little background, I was valedictorian of my class. I best grades in my class consistently all my life type stuff. And I went to private school, so it's not as big as an accomplishment if you start comparing yourself to public schools. But still, I have a ground and a track record of being top of class educationally. And I feel like I used that. I studied aerospace, and project management. And it's a little bit discouraging though, because I didn't have competition in my grade. People recognized from even way back in middle school that, oh hey, he's Daniel, he's the smart kid. I'm not going to even compete because I can't beat him. And you don't get the spotlight when you are in education. When you do well in education growing up, you don't get the spotlight. The popular kids do, and the popular kids are often not the smart kids. Or not, they can be smart, but they're often not the top achievers. Which is, I'm not complaining, I'm pointing out trends that are pretty equivocally true. I wasn't the popular kid. I was actually the most, and I'll claim this, I was the most made fun of and bullied kid in my grade. And that happened. There's one other kid he was pretty bad, but he turned out all right too. Anyway, so yeah, high school was, your social circles have developed, you learn how to talk to people, but you don't learn workplace etiquette typically unless, if you're in high school, that's when you're getting your first jobs, right? I worked at a PEP beef stand. I was a fry cook serving up burgers and really, really good fries, actually, over at a PEP beef stand near my house, 2 minutes from my house. And they had a, hey, we're hiring sign, and I showed up and I said, hey, I saw your sign. I'd like to work this summer. And they said, yep, sure, and gave me the job on the spot. And I got paid under the table in high school. I didn't make much, but it is what it is. Anyway, so yeah, you graduate and then you're thrown into the real world. Maybe. So some people get the blessing and sometimes curse of going to college. It's this overarching expectation that's been thrown on them from their parents from a very young age in society that you must go to college to be successful. That's simply not true. College, from an educational standpoint, is the most specialized you can get. But if you don't care about education, or it's not necessary for what you do, like if you are, let's say you're an apprentice, which doesn't really happen much, but let's say you're an apprentice under a master carpenter. Yeah, we'll say master carpenter. And you like carpentry. You work with your hands. You like to do this thing. You did it all in high school on the weekends, and you graduate, and you're like, well, I don't need to go to college to cut wood, to measure things, and to shape stuff. I can learn this on the job. And it's not so much that you don't need education, it's that the source of your education is your workplace. And that's perfectly fine. But that's not our society. Our society says you need to go to college to be successful, to get a job. Even with trades. And there's trade schools for that too. But needless to say, college can be wrong for many people. But if you are looking for highly specialized education, college is great. College is perfect for you because that's where you're going to learn highly specialized education. And the benefit of college, everything you learn there you can read in a book, pretty much. What you don't learn from books there is the stories and the experiences of your professors in the real world before you hit it. Not to say you're not in the real world. I worked 2 jobs when I was in college and had to pay my own rent and my own food and everything else. Like I said, I think I've explained this before, but the only thing that was provided for me was my actual tuition by my parents, which is a blessing. But my other expenses, I had to cover, and they phased it in pretty well for me. Like, I didn't have to cover food the first year or 2 of being in college. But by year 3, I definitely did. That was also COVID, so it worked out. That's when I learned how to cook. But I also learned very specialized aerospace engineering knowledge. And that's something that I wouldn't have had otherwise. Because I'm a auditory learner. Like, I need to be taught to really pick something up. Or I can also experience it. I can pull from that. But other people are similar or dissimilar to me. So some people can just read a book and get it. Other people, like me, need to hear it to get it. Someone needs to teach it for them to get it. So in that sense, college is great for higher education, for if you are pursuing specific knowledge, and your social circles also widen. Oh man, the parking garage is full. Your social circles also widen in college, which is great. And typically your lifelong friends you'll develop in college, which is great. And you can develop stuff afterwards as well. Just is what it is. Anyway, I just got to work. I got a meeting in 15 minutes. So thank you for listening to this mid-employment podcast. MEP. I like PEP better. This MEP talk. And I hope this was useful. And if you stuck with it, I'm surprised you did. This was more so a unplanned rambling. But thank you for listening anyway. And I'll catch you in the next one. Probably later today, but maybe not. We'll see. Bye.